You guys, the 2020 experience is here, and I could not be more excited to share this with you. It is a culmination of the many years I have spent participating in high-level masterminds and the many years of leading masterminds. Quite frankly, it's what I desperately want myself, and I think is needed and is completely missing. I don't know anyone else doing this. And so I put it together just for you. It is for 32 ambitious women who are ready to make 2020 their year. It involves a larger mastermind of 32. It involves a smaller mastermind of 8. It involves accelerators to really dig deep and get momentum when you need it most. It involves one-on-one expert coaching and services. It involves 3 in-person meetings, 2 of which are at Miraval, which is a luxury retreat, which really, in and of itself, transforms every part of you because it allows you to tap into the wellness and the mindset and the peace that is needed in order to truly go after your dreams. This entire year is intended to help you go bigger than you've ever gone before, to really get outside of your comfort zone and to leave behind those old patterns, those old excuses that keep showing up over and over again, and they're holding you back and keeping you from having the life that you really want. So this program is not for the faint of heart. It is only for those who are 100% committed and ready to go all in, ready to leave their excuses at the door and to really show up in a way that they've never shown up before for themselves, for their families, for their careers, for a group of women that perhaps they've not experienced that before. A tribe of women who are really at that high level, supporting you, pushing you, and challenging you, and calling you on your stuff so that you can be the best version of yourself. It is going to be a year of intense hustle and intense flow, and it is going to change lives. And the ripple effect is going to go far beyond just this group of 32 women. But it is here. It is ready for you. If you're looking for a breakout year in 2020, you can apply at 2020mastermindexperience.com. Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode 138. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back. I am your host, Heather Hubbard. Thank you so much for joining me this week and every week. If you have not yet left a rating and review on your favorite podcast app, I would love it if you would hit pause and go do so. If you listen on iTunes, and for those of you with an Apple phone, I recently learned a lot of you actually listen on my website, which is perfectly fine. But I want to give you a little trick, a little tip, if maybe you're not into podcasts just yet. If you go to your phone, there's a little purple app icon that is for podcasts right there on your Apple phone. If you're on an Android, there are plenty of other options like iHeart, Spotify, Stitcher. But if you are on Apple, there's just this little purple icon. It says podcast right under it. So you just click that, and then you can search for Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard. And if you're doing that for the first time, that's where you can leave the rating and review, and then you can hit subscribe and you'll get it every single week. It'll be right there on your phone waiting for you, especially if you're traveling in the car, anything like that. For those of you who already are listening on an app, and if it's iTunes, it can get a little wonky. So if you're listening to this right now, you can just click the 3 dots, and that will take you to an option, and you just click show. And then you scroll down a little bit, and there's the option for the rating, which is the star system. Or if you scroll down a little bit more, you can leave a review. And it really does make a big difference. So if you listen to the podcast, if you appreciate it, and you would like me to keep bringing them to you, especially without those annoying sponsorship ads, then please do me that favor and just leave an honest rating or review. All right, let's get into today's topic: analysis paralysis. All right, so here's the thing. Type A professionals, we so fall in this category. Attorneys definitely fall in this category, but I think a lot of professionals, regardless of your industry or background, you experience this. If you're in an industry where you have to analyze things and you have to give people advice, right? And you're constantly weighing risks, or you're really into the details, it can carry over into every area of your life where you start to have difficulty making decisions. And then other people just have difficulty making decisions regardless. And so, as you may know, I'm sure you do if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, right now we are filling the spots for our 2020 Mastermind experience. So I have been doing a lot of telephone calls, a lot of interviews with applicants, and it's always interesting to see from the interviewer perspective where people get in their heads. And I do it too, right? When I'm the interviewee, I'm always in a mastermind. Right now, I am considering the mastermind that I'm going to participate in 2020. So I'm doing my applications right now and preparing for my interviews. And I know that I can do the same thing. I just hired a publicist and I went through this. So I think it's through that process that it occurred to me we should do an episode on analysis paralysis. Certainly, it comes up in so many contexts. I've just been seeing it so much lately. And I was like, how have we been doing this podcast for over 2 years? It'll be 3 years in, I think, end of February, which is crazy. How have we never done an episode on this? I don't know. So I guarantee that a lot of my listeners experience this. So if you're like, yep, that's me, then let's walk through that. Let's walk through what happens when you get totally stuck in your head and you can't make a decision, what's going on, and how to actually move out of that place. So when we're trying to make a decision and we are overthinking it, one of the first questions you want to ask yourself is simply, what are the stakes? What are the stakes at issue with making this decision? And if the stakes are really low, then I would encourage you to just let it go and make a decision, because even if you make the wrong one, it doesn't matter, right? So I think when we get in this state of where we overanalyze everything, like it's big and small. And so the easiest win that you can have, the easiest way to stop doing this with every area of your life is to just recognize when the stakes are low and say, oh, well, this one doesn't matter. I may not like it. It may not feel comfortable, but I can at least logically recognize that it's not worth my time and my energy to try to figure this out and get it perfect because the stakes are so low. And so here's a good example. My husband doesn't listen to this podcast, so I think I can give these examples. I'm going to choose him and he'll never know. Although I do think maybe some of his friends listen, so they might tell him, hopefully not. He can have analysis paralysis with anything. So, we go to Costco. Well, we try not to go together because I like to just get in and get out. And he wants to walk down every single aisle and look at all of the options. And then let's say, there's something on sale that maybe he's interested in, light bulbs, or he loves to bake, like some type of, baking equipment. And then he can stand there for 30 minutes trying to make the right decision. It can be anything, right? And so this is where it's like, okay, well, now how much does this cost and what are the stakes, right? So if you get it wrong, what's the worst that's going to happen? How upset are you going to be, and can you just throw it out or can you return it? In that case, right, just make a decision and go with it. And you're doing this for yourself, because I see what it does to people, myself included, when we get in this state of analysis paralysis. It completely consumes us. It drains our energy. It drains us emotionally. We're not really present when we're with friends and family and others. And depending on if the stakes are high enough, we might even wake up in the middle of our sleep. So this is a great practice. If the stakes are low, let it go. Now, if the stakes are higher, right? Maybe it's I'm thinking about quitting my job, or I'm thinking about getting a divorce. Yeah, those stakes are pretty high. I get it. You might want to think a little bit more about that. But that's question number one, is just what are the stakes, and look at it on the spectrum and then decide, okay, what is this really worth in terms of time and energy? And then the second question that you want to ask yourself is, what's the mistake that I'm worried about making? What's the mistake I'm worried about making? Because that's generally what's driving all analysis paralysis. Because we can think of it in terms of, oh, well, I need to weigh the pros and the cons. Very rarely is it about the pros. It generally is the, what if I make a mistake? And the mistake could be, what if I lose a wonderful opportunity? What if I pass this opportunity up? But that's still in the back of our minds. It's the, what mistake am I going to make? What is the trade-off? What am I going to lose? That is what is driving the analysis paralysis, where you're trying to get it right. That's the issue. You're trying to get it right because you're afraid you're going to mess it up. So what is it that you're afraid of messing up? And sometimes that's obvious, but a lot of times you got to dig deeper, because we don't always fully understand what we're thinking or our motivation behind something. So you really do have to go below surface level to figure out the real fear or the real mistake that you're worried about making. So for example, with me, when I was looking to hire a publicist and, I'm doing the interview, the mistake I'm worried about making is investing in the wrong publicist. The mistake is I spend this money and they don't get me the results I'm looking for. Or I spend this money and they don't do the work at all. They don't even try. Or I spend this money and I don't get along with them. And it becomes this, really long, horrible relationship that I'm just trying to get through. Those are the issues that are really in the back of my head as to the mistake I'm making. And then you can dig even deeper than that, right? Because it's like, okay, well, let's say you make the mistake of you spend this money and you don't get the results. Well, what's the fear there? What's the consequences of that mistake that you're really worried about? And that could be any number of things, right? It might be, oh, well, if I was working with a publicist that was able to get what I wanted, then that was like a lost opportunity. And so now I've got a delay. Okay, so a delay is what I'm worried about. Or maybe it's the no results. And then it's like, okay, well, I spent that amount of money. All right, so what does that mean? Does that then mean that you're just out that money? Does that mean you can't pay your mortgage because of it, right? Like, because you might be investing with the hopes that you're going to get a certain amount back. It's different for every person in every situation, but really digging deeper to get clear on what that thing is, it's going to help you make a decision and honestly be more logical and rational in making your decision. The weird thing about analysis paralysis, when we get stuck in our heads, is we think that it is logical. We think it's rational. But the truth is, it's often emotional, because once you get stuck in your head, it's again about that fear. It's about that mistake that you're worried about making. And that's really where we tap into the fear, which we can totally feel in our body. We start to get frustrated. We start to get angry. We have all the feelings. And then truly we are making emotional decisions. We're not making logical or rational decisions. So when you catch yourself and you're like, the stakes are high, so it's still worth truly thinking through, being able to ask yourself that second question of what's the mistake? What's the true mistake? What's the worst mistake that I'm worried about making where I somehow can't come back or it's going to harm me in a certain way? Getting clear on that will help you ask the right questions and think through it from a more productive perspective. And then the third question that you want to ask yourself is, am I analyzing this from the perspective of strategy, perfectionism, or fear? And it could be a combination. But sometimes I think it's easy for us to claim that the reason why we want to think about it is because we're being strategic, right? We're being smart. And sometimes that's true. But oftentimes it's not even close to the truth. It's because we are trying to get it perfect, right? We want it 100% right, no mistakes, or we're simply afraid. We're afraid of what might happen or not happen and what that means. So let's just use my publicist example again. As I'm thinking through that, am I trying to be strategic? And by the way, we're always going to say yes. As you keep going with the questions, you might be like, okay, now let's go back to how this is being strategic. But so yeah, I'm trying to be strategic. I want to make a good business decision. And then it's, am I trying to be perfect? Am I trying to get this 100% right with 0% or as small a percent as possible of any risk? And sometimes I can be like, oh yeah, that's the issue. I'm trying to get this perfect. Well, if you're trying to get it perfect, you might as well go back to question number 1, when the stakes are low. You've just got to let it go because you're never going to get it perfect. And you are literally going to run yourself ragged trying to come up with the perfect answer when it does not exist. So if you get to the perfectionism and you're like, yep, that's what I'm doing, time to let that go. The third one is the fear, right? So is this about fear? And it might be. In episode 120, we talked about the fear of success. So sometimes it is a fear of what if things go wrong, but sometimes it's a fear of what if things go right. So if we're talking about the publicist, right, there might be a part of me that says, oh, I'm afraid I won't get the publicity I'm looking for. And then I could have spent, money in another place, right? So that's that fear. But then there could potentially be the fear of, what if it's amazing and it goes gangbusters and I don't have the team to support it, or I don't have the systems to support it? Or what if that puts me in the spotlight and I don't know if I'm comfortable with the spotlight? That's not how I feel, but you get the point. There can be two sides to fear. We say we want things, but then when we think about what that might look like, if it truly comes to fruition in its, largest form, it scares us. And so we can spend all of this time claiming to try to make a good decision when the truth is we're just trying to avoid what we're afraid of, which could be failure or it could be success. So again, if you get to that place where it's like, yep, that's part of what's there, then get clear on, is this the fear of failure or is this a fear of success? And from there, you can dig down and do some work around that, because the thinking isn't going to help you resolve those fears. There's certainly some mindset work you can do around that. There's certainly some therapeutic work you can do around that. We're not going to get into that in this particular episode, but just know that there is other work to be processed if fear is the issue. So if it's perfectionism, let it go. If it's fear, you can go do some work over to the side, but that in and of itself shouldn't keep you from making a decision, because it doesn't really impact the decision you make. Okay, because it's a fear. It's probably unrealistic and it's work you got to do on yourself, right? The results of the decision you make aren't going to change anything. So if though you're like, yes, this is truly about strategy, awesome. Then you want to move to question number 4, which is, am I asking the right questions? Because if it's about strategy and you're trying to be as strategic as possible in making your decision, then get clear on the results you're looking for and what's going to best position you such that once the decision is made, you feel good and you feel confident and it truly is putting you in the best position possible, because that's what strategy really is. So let's just stick with the publicist example. I think we'll just keep going with that. From a strategic standpoint, I can start asking questions. Let's say I'm worried that maybe they're not really that good. I can start asking questions around, have you ever worked with anyone else like me? That may or may not be the right question, but it's one to start with, right? Because it could be, if they're not familiar with the type of work I do, they don't know how to pitch me to the right media outlets to begin with, right? That might be a good question, but let's say their answer is no. It doesn't mean that they're not a good fit, right? And so that's where the better question is not, have you worked with anyone like me? The better question is, I really am concerned that I may or may not get results. So I'm curious as to what approach you would take in pitching me to media outlets and whether or not you have certain media outlets in mind or how you would pitch me or present me. Do you see how that's a better question? Because it's so much more direct. It goes to the heart of the issue and allows them to respond. So often, like I said, I see it when people are asking me questions on calls and when I'm asking questions and making decisions. And again, we do this with not just hiring people. We also do it with career changes and other things like that. We ask questions that we think will get us to the answer as opposed to just asking the real question. Because you could even think, okay, well, I'm going to ask, what are the most common media outlets you get? Or can you tell me, have you ever worked with a client where you weren't able to get them any media outlets? Or tell me the clients where you got the most media outlets. You can ask those questions and it can give you information. And it can give you information where you start to build, this story in your mind about whether or not they can get you those same results. But the better question, one, I would say the better question is just to go direct to the point. But if you want to ask those other questions, just be sure that you know that you're following it all the way through. So if they say, here's the most I ever got, can you explain to me why you think they got that many? And you might find out that they're a total rock star and they were also pitching themselves and they had who knows, millions of dollars to throw at it. That's actually the information that you really need. So that's where I really want you to consider, am I asking the right questions based on the results that I am trying to achieve or the mistake that I'm worried about making? And for those of you who are professionals or you own your own business where you sell services, keep that in mind as well. A lot of times people ask questions, but the questions they're asking aren't really the true questions. And they may know that, but they may not know that. So helping them work through that and being able to have more direct conversations or to say, why are you asking that question? Not in a judgmental, skeptical way, but in a what's the concern behind that question can really help facilitate them thinking through it as well. And to kind of give a different example, if we're talking about, let's say, changing jobs, this is where people totally focus on the wrong things, right? Because we're worried about making mistakes. And so we're like, well, I guess I just need as much information as possible. And so we start asking questions like, well, what are the benefits and what are the hours and what are the expectations and how does this work and how does that work? When very rarely are those the things that are going to make you happy or dissatisfied in that new job. And a lot of times it's about culture or knowing whether or not you're going to be a good fit. And we have a hard time asking those questions, or we ask very roundabout questions, thinking that if we have that answer, we'll draw our own conclusions. And it's far better to just be able to identify the best questions to ask to really allow you to analyze from a strategic perspective, not the perspective of getting it perfect or because you're afraid. And then the fifth question to ask yourself is, am I taking action to get the right answer? Am I taking action to get the right answer? Because if you were just in your head, you're never going to get the right answer. And if you have identified it's about strategy, if you are trying to ask the right questions, but you still don't feel like you have the right answer, generally, if you move to number 5, that's going to help you out. Because if the answer is no, then that's the problem. If the answer is yes, then you're going to get to the solution pretty quickly. You're going to get to the answer, even if it's not the perfect answer, one that you feel comfortable with. So, I'm actually working on this keynote now. And one of the things I talk about is the 4 ways in which we tend to try to address things. And one is by thinking it through, right? We like to do lots of thinking, which is kind of what we're talking about with this analysis paralysis. The other is we then start to talk it out, right? So we get out of our head and we start talking to our friends and our family and our colleagues, and we ask them a million questions and get all of their opinions, which is probably there's never going to be a consensus. So then that makes you even more confused. You're not sure who to believe or who not to believe or who's asking the best questions and who's not. Not to mention the fact that a lot of times your friends, family, and colleagues, they're not thinking about it from a strategic perspective either. They might be addressing it from a fear-based place, right? They're happily going to project their fears onto you. And they may not realize that, you may not realize that, but so you talk it out, right? So you think it through in your head nonstop, then you start talking it out. The other is that you start learning about things, right? So it's like, oh, I'm going to read a book, or I'm going to listen to a podcast. I'm not going to hire a publicist until I have read all the books on publicity or listen to all the podcasts on it and figure out how to do it myself. And then, right? No, but that's what we do. We get so into I want to learn as much as possible because then I'll be able to make a good decision. And then the last one is, I'm going to meditate. I'm going to journal. I'm going to pray. And there is nothing wrong with that. I have a daily practice of doing all of those things. And yet I know that the answer is not going to just come to me if I'm coming at it from this fearful, desperate place. Right? So when you're just praying for a miracle, the best way to have that miracle is just to start taking action. That's the best way for that miracle to come into your life, right? So if you catch yourself, right, like moving in these phases of you're in your head thinking about it, or then you're talking it out with everyone, or you're reading all the things, listening to all the things, or, you're just meditating, journaling, and praying for a miracle, then you are in analysis paralysis. Okay. And none of those things are actually doing anything. We think we're doing something, right? Because it's like, well, I feel like I'm meditating. That's a thing. It's a verb. I'm talking to people. It's taking up my time. That feels like a thing. None of those things are actually taking action though. So for example, the best way for me to hire a good publicist is to just start getting on the phone with publicists and having conversations. The best way for me to find out if someone's going to be a great fit from a, publicity perspective is to just let them start trying to do it. Maybe it's not a big long-term contract, right? There are so many things that you can start doing. And if you're like, well, I don't even know if I need a publicist, then one of the things that you could do, right, is just start doing your own pitches. Start sending it out to media outlets and see what happens. But it's the action, it's the doing that's going to help you come up with the right answer. So again, because I'm trying to give a few different examples here, if you're thinking about changing careers or changing jobs, and like you're going through all of those lists of things, and you're not even sure who to apply to or what to do, like just get out there. It could be talking to people. It could be visiting the facility or the company. It could be making phone calls about different benefit options that you could get on your own regardless of the company. Those things help you take action in a way to determine, this is strategic. This is helping me come up with a good decision. Or, not really, because it doesn't really matter. Then you're just stuck in your head either because of the mistake, the perfectionism, the fear. And so you're just avoiding. You are acting like you're doing, but you're just avoiding. And in fact, the very worst kind of analysis paralysis is overthinking something before a decision even needs to be made. The amount of mental gymnastics before you even apply for something, right? So maybe there's a job you see. Maybe it's the 2020 mastermind. Maybe it's something else. And you're just like, I don't even know if I should apply. I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, you've not even gotten an offer of the job yet, right? Like, you're totally trying to analyze a situation that's you're not even halfway there yet. So if you're engaged in analysis paralysis well before you're even presented with an opportunity to make a decision, it's time to let go. So just to summarize, when you are trying to make a decision and you're really grappling with it, number one, what are the stakes? Is it high or is it low? If it's low, let it go. Number two, what's the mistake that you're worried about making? Get clear on the real issue, the real mistake. Number three, ask yourself, am I thinking about this from the perspective of strategy? Am I doing it from the perspective of I'm trying to get it perfect, or because I'm afraid, whether it's success or failure? So getting really clear on that. And if it's strategy, moving to number four is, am I asking the right questions to allow me to make a good decision? And then number five, am I taking action? Am I taking action? So if I'm asking the right questions, am I then taking action to be able to feel confident in just making a decision already? And then I will say the very last one, which could potentially go at the beginning, but let's say you've done the thing, then it really is, do I trust myself? do I trust myself? And this shows up a lot, but I kind of think that you want to look at this at the back end because it allows you to then really wrap it up with a tight little bow. Because a lot of times, and this kind of goes to the mistakes that we're worried about, we've maybe made bad decisions before, right? We've gotten burned before. So, it's, do I trust myself to make a really good decision? Do I trust myself to learn, even if it is a mistake? Do I trust myself to follow through if I do this? So for me, right, like if I'm hiring a publicist and I'm worried they're not going to get results, well, is it that I don't trust myself to speak up when I see that things aren't working? Or is it that I don't trust myself to do the work when they, send me pitches, right? Is it that I don't trust myself to follow through and get them what they need in order to do the thing? So many times we're actually the issue. And it's because of past problems that we project that on to situations and people, when the truth is, if you go through that analysis and then you ask yourself at the end, do I still, I'm about to make a decision. Do I trust myself to make a good one? If I have some fears around it, document it, because you still just move forward with the decision you made, but you now know what you need to be looking out for and doing yourself to help make sure that those mistakes don't happen. So I hope that's been helpful for those of you that tend to overthink everything. Get out of your own way, let go of the analysis paralysis. You will feel so much better, and you probably won't experience a ton of difference in results, except for you might actually get them more because you're taking action and not procrastinating. All right, I will see you next week. For show notes, downloads, and other free resources, and to keep the conversation going, head on over to hustleandflowpodcast.com. See you there.